You're listening to Psych with Mike. For more episodes or to connect with the show with comments, ideas, or to be a guest, go to www.psychwithmike.com. Follow the show on Twitter @PsychWithMike or like the Facebook page @PsychWithMike. Now, here's Psych with Mike.
Welcome into the Psych with Mike Library. This is Dr. Michael Mahan, and I am here with Mr. Brett Newcomb.
Good morning, young man.
How are you?
I'm all right.
Yeah, I was studying the remote intently to make sure that I push the right button because for some reason I want to push the wrong button. I don't know.
You've lived your entire life that way. Why should you be surprised?
Well, you would think we've been doing this now for how long?
I don't know.
A couple years.
Yeah.
And I still don't know which is the right button. So I guess that ship has sailed.
You didn't hear what I just said to you. You've been doing that your whole life.
Yeah.
Why would 2 years make a difference?
Yeah, I guess it doesn't.
You change that often?
No.
Oh.
Although that is something we're going to talk about.
Topic for another day. That's right. Yeah.
Is change. This is foreshadowing. Do you believe that personality is malleable, or do you believe it's pretty crystalline?
You know, years ago, I taught a course at the university about aging and dealing with aging populations.
Yeah.
And we did a lot of research. I had my students do research on aging populations. And the consistent data that we got back was that you were the same kind of old person that you were as a young person. And so as a young person, if you were enthusiastic and engaged and open to experience and interacting with other people, you would be that kind of an old person. Mm-hmm. And as a young person, if you were hesitant and avoidant and negative and grumpy, everything was wrong or bad or, woe is me, that as an old person, you'd be the same way.
Yeah.
At least until somebody put you out of your misery.
Yeah. Well,
which may happen more often than we want to admit.
It may be. Yeah. But as I said, that's foreshadowing because that's going to be a show.
If you're really interested, come back.
Come back.
Yeah. And if you're not,
don't go anywhere.
Yeah.
But one of the things that...
So that presumes we're going to talk about something else today.
We are.
Okay.
That I have been really tracking and myself and paying attention to is the effects that coming out of the pandemic are going to have on individuals and society as a whole. I think that I think there are going to be volumes of literature that are going to be produced that are going to talk about how life is different post-pandemic than it was pre-pandemic. Would you agree with that?
I've been reading some of the same stuff, and my reaction to that is we always think we're the center of the universe, that whatever we're dealing with in our little corner of the universe, the whole world is dealing with, which I don't think is necessarily a good way to look at life.
But that's why I think the pandemic is such a unique event, because unlike 9/11, which was an event that everybody in the United States went through, it wasn't worldwide. This has been one of the most significant worldwide events and been followed because media coverage is so ubiquitous more closely than the flu pandemic in 1918. And I think it's
love it when you use words like that, Mike.
Okay.
It's ubiquitous, universal.
Yeah.
Everybody has it.
Yeah.
Everybody does it. That's the point I'm making. Americans tend to think that whatever our experience is in our little corner of the world is ubiquitous. There may have been a ubiquitous aspect to the pandemic, especially in civilized societies.
Okay. Yeah.
Civilized in the sense of high tech medicine, large economies of the world. And there were a lot of deaths, and there was a lot of illness, and there were a lot of social accommodations like social isolation, working from home, what have you. That in industrialized nations, we had that occurrence. I don't know that you can extrapolate that our response, the American response, is a universal response.
No, I see what you're saying. So you're saying the pandemic was universal. You're not arguing that.
Yeah.
You're saying that the way in which people experience it, if you're living in sub-Saharan Africa and you're living on subsistence farming and barely getting enough rice every day to eat, whether the pandemic happened or not doesn't really matter.
Maslow's hierarchy is going to be a little different.
No, I hear you.
If I'm having to worry about, am I going to be required by my company to go back to the office, or do I work from home for the rest of my life? And then having the issues of, well, if I work from home for the rest of my life, how am I going to have a social life? I don't know my neighbors, because in midtown, small town America and middle class America, urban fortresses, we build around our house with big fences and stuff. We don't necessarily know our neighbors. We don't want to know them. We're suspicious of them. And in Missouri, we all carry guns, and we guard our doors, and we say, hey, come on my property, not my backyard. I don't want to deal with any of those urban problems. So you have stuff like that, and you tend to extrapolate, well, the whole world is like that. And then you watch news media, and the news media says, oh my God, the whole world is like that. Be suspicious of your neighbor. Don't go out to work. Don't wear a mask. Don't let them make your kids come to school, but don't let them keep your kids home from school. And when your kids come to school, don't make them be with other people, but make them have, it's just crazy. So I digress.
Right.
But the point being, you're going to say, all this has led you to have some kind of brain fog.
Yeah.
And I think the brain fog, if it's real, is a side effect of all the media that you consume.
Well, whether I have it or not, one of the artifacts of the pandemic has been,
or
at least
has
been
reported.
To be. Yes, being reported as this persistent brain fog that seems to be different than pre-pandemic. And I don't know.
I don't know that about that.
Okay.
Yeah. And I haven't seen any research to support. I've heard people claim it. Oh my God, it's coming. It's a wave. We need to have an answer for it. I'm not sure we even have it, let alone need to have an answer for it.
Well, I think we have things that we recommend to people to limit or minimize brain fog.
I think what we do is put a label on it and sell it.
Yeah.
Here, let me write a book and tell you how to avoid this.
Well, why don't you write that book? Because I think you'd make a lot of money.
Yeah, but that's not my goal in life.
No.
And I think it would be BS.
So do you think brain fog itself is BS?
I think what's being described as brain fog, yes.
Okay. So in what way do you think that it is not an actual thing?
I think, I'm going to go way out on a limb here.
Sure.
I have no evidence, no science to back this up.
Yeah.
This is purely my own anecdotal observation. I think that people spend so much time on media devices, of one kind or another, a screen in their hand of one kind or another, and mediated conversations with people, mediated interactions with people, mediated being through an instrument, not interpersonally, not face-to-face social encounters, that we have developed a greatly shortened attention span. And I think our lack of an attention span then impacts our lack of precise thinking, our lack of reasoning, our ability to discuss or argue with somebody about a point of view without having an emotional breakdown or a shutdown. My wife and I are having a big discussion this morning about trigger warnings at the university level. Do we need to have trigger warnings for our classes to say, this is a class that you have to take on blah, 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 whatever, sociology. And in this class, here's 75 things we're going to talk about this semester. And if you have any sensitivity to any of these, prepare yourself. Get some backup. Get a support group. Get some, or I can excuse you from the assignment. And I'll just send you a grade. It's all right. You participated. You signed up. So it's okay. And so then the university students, George Will wrote an editorial in the paper today about the Stanford University students who were screaming and yelling and being obscene when they had a speaker come to campus that they didn't want to come to campus. And we're talking about the whole trigger warning concern. He's going to say something they don't want to hear. He's going to say something they don't like. He's going to say something they don't agree with. So their capacity for resolving or dealing with any of that is just to blow up and scream and yell and say, oh my God, life sucks and we're screwed. Woe is me. Brain fog.
Well, but that feels like to me to be two different things. So there may be brain fog, which I think then, and I want to unpack
as
it more.
a discreetly different thing.
and then there's entitlement,
okay,
which says that you get whatever you believe is what everybody else has to feed you,
exactly,
or else they're horrible and doing it wrong, and you have the right to protest. But so what I'm hearing you say though is that you believe brain fog may be a thing. You think that what constitutes
I would like more precise definition. When you say brain fog, what the hell are we talking about? There was a book that came out a couple of years ago that rocked the bestseller list for a while, called Grit. That the person did a study, an evaluation of why so many of our younger adults really seem to not be able to get the handle, let alone lose the handle on how to manage life. And the argument that they were making was sometimes you just need to suck it up. You have to deal with hardships. You have to deal with problems. You have to overcome obstacles. You have to make yourself perform on demand. Sometimes life requires effort, repeated effort to be successful. And you use an example of, one of the most common examples that I've heard in my lifetime is Michael Jordan. Won the ball for the last shot. Always won the ball for the last shot. He had that confidence. I can make it. And he made it more than anybody else ever made it, but he also missed it more than he ever made it. 3 times as much as he ever made it. But he still believed he could make it, and he still wanted to try, and he wanted the opportunity. He didn't want to go sit in the corner and sit down and say, woe is me, I can't make that shot. I'm screwed, life sucks. I quit. Somebody saved me. And the argument in Grit was too many of our younger Americans don't have enough resilience or enough strategies for overcoming difficulties, and so we have to find ways to cushion them, protect them, save them. And I think you and I have had conversations. That's what our school districts have done for the last 20 years. When you say everybody has to make an A, everybody has to get a blue ribbon, everybody has to get a diploma, and then they all have to go to college, whether they can afford it or not, because we all have to move the herd along together. No outliers, no stragglers, nobody left behind.
I see. So you really see these things as interconnected. What a lot of people would call entitlement, and what people are now calling this idea of brain fog. But you see the brain fog more as
shortened attention span.
A degradation of the attention span that's happened over time. So it used to be that the Children's Television Workshop that did Sesame Street back in the 60s did tons and tons of research on what the attention span of different age ranges were. And then they constructed Sesame Street to match those kinds of rhythms.
Span, exactly.
So that you would have, sing-songy thing, and everybody would watch it, and then all of a sudden, bam, you'd have color and sound, and that would bring the attention span, the attention back of the child, so that they would hold the attention artificially through the changing of the cadence.
Well, that was one piece of evidence.
But we always believed that adults had an attention span, that they could force themselves to pay attention, and now maybe they can't.
Yes. That's your argument. Another example, the data that supports that, is when everybody was watching the same television shows, because there were only 3 channels. Everybody went to the bathroom at commercial. And so they all knew that. So the commercials were recorded at twice the volume or more of the regular TV show, so that when you went off to the bathroom, you could still hear the commercial. And you came back, and the regular TV show would resume, the sound would go back down.
You're blowing my mind. Because
you didn't know that they did
back in the 70s.
That was deliberate and intentional?
Yeah. Back in the 70s, when I was watching TV, there were only 3 channels. I always thought those commercials just seemed so loud, and I thought they were just trying to overpower you. But that actually makes a lot of sense.
They passed a law eventually to say you can't do that. When they went to cable systems and people were getting cable, and they had all these multiple channels, then the regulatory agency said you can't jack up the sound on the commercials. You got to keep it within a range. And so for a while they were doing it. Now I think they've drifted away from it. But anyway, all of these things in service of the argument that it helped decrease our attention span. We would be attentive for a block where there'd be a break to go to commercial. We'd hold our kidneys, get a snack, whatever, till we got to commercial. Then we'd run, take care of business, and come back. Well, now we have the ability to pause it. We record everything, and then we can just pause it and stop whenever we want to and go to the bathroom and take a phone call and come back. But there has been a cost of attrition to our attention span.
And when they do research on how we use the internet, what that shows is that people tend to spend between 10 and 30 seconds on any given page, which is certainly not enough time to consume the information. And then they have to switch off of it and go somewhere else to reinitialize
or they just lose the focus.
Yeah.
I was reading an article yesterday. It was a long, extensive article about the SVB bank failure and all the reasons for it and arguments around one side or the other. It was a long article of intense economic data. I read it carefully for about 10 minutes, And then I started skipping paragraphs and skimming and looking for key words. So I'm a victim of the same thing, of the short attention span. I mean, if they didn't put it in the first 10 minutes, I didn't get it.
Right. Well, but that still is a much longer attention span.
That's because I'm smarter than most people. Yeah. Maybe, but the point I think still holds. If you're producing content for other people like these podcasts, if we don't get them in the first 5 minutes, they're like, oh, ho hum, and off they go. And so if we spend the first 5 minutes bloviating and BSing, and they still don't know what we're talking about, why would they stay and listen?
Well, because we're so entertaining.
But not informative.
That could be true, But then... Okay, let's run to our break and...
But that's right, so people can go to the bathroom.
And go to the bathroom.
Come back in 20 seconds.
Yeah.
We'll talk louder while you're gone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, Brett.
Yes.
What's your favorite thing about Psych with Mike?
The opportunity to engage in mental gymnastics with you.
Wow, that is really powerful. So...
It's fun.
Do you think that that's beneficial for other people?
I have no clue. I would hope so, but I have no clue.
So people should write us and let us know.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
That would be great.
Especially if they agree with me.
As always, if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike. Okay, we're back. So this is not the track that I thought that this conversation was going to go on.
I knew that.
But I'm very interested in what we're talking about because I see the logic that you are following here, and I think I agree with it. Wow. And so if that's the case, if we've created, either artificially or whatever, we've created this reduced attention span in at least Western society. How do we uncreate that? Is there a way to extend an attention span?
Yeah, I think there are. I mean, this article that you will attach to this podcast, and people can read if they're interested. This person said there are several ways that I practice avoiding brain fog.
Yeah.
First one, I never let my body get too tense for too long.
Right.
Well, okay. What does that mean? You constantly take your pulse, you count your breaths, you say, am I okay? Do you do that while you're attending to something? Do you just watch it in the background? Or does it overwhelm you? Does your heart start exploding in your chest? Or your head get tight from blood surging into your brain, you get a migraine? Or your vision goes blurry. I mean, how do you know to say, well, wait a minute, it's time now for my break. I need to meditate. I need to breathe. I need to relax. I need to let myself calm down. So this person says they've figured that out, and they use that as a skill to avoid brain fog. Then the second thing that they do is they never use screens of any kind an hour before bedtime.
Yeah.
So that's intriguing because does that mean they stop watching television an hour before they go to bed? They don't watch movies, they don't check their email, they don't get on their computers.
Well, I think she said that very specifically, yeah.
Right. And so then we know sidebar effects of that. I'd be curious, the data that we've seen most recently over the last 6 or 8 months is that sexual encounters between partners are declining in frequency, in part because they lie in bed together alone using pornography on their own personal screens while they masturbate, instead of have sex with each other. So if you turn those screens off, what does that suggest? You might have to spend time being intimate with one another, or you might have an opportunity to.
You're at least going to interact.
Yeah. But so you set an alarm, and then you shut everything down, and you sit. Do you read a book? Do you paint your toenails? Do you cut your fingernails? I mean, what do you do for the hour before you go to bed besides just sit with it and not get agitated or stirred up by any kind? And in the studies that say, well, it's the light from the screen, the light waves, the frequency, they mess with your brain waves, they mess with your heartbeat. I know there are research data to support some of those arguments, but so the question is, and then number 4, she never goes a day without meditating, so you have to learn meditative skills, and I'm certainly not one to criticize meditating as a skill or as a useful practice. But I am curious about how that then helps you avoid whatever they're describing as brain fog. But I'm open to the proposition that it might.
You missed number 3.
What was it? Did I skip one?
I never load up on glucose.
Oh, yeah. Avoid sugar.
Yeah. So,
especially at night. I mean, before you go to bed, or just any time is.
I would think that if you're not going to load up on glucose, you would do that for the entire day. Certainly before bed would be even more of a focus, but I think that having too much glucose in your system at any point during the day.
She says she eats a lot of food that's rich in magnesium instead of sugar. And that she makes sure she has her last caffeine by 10 o'clock in the morning.
Which I would never do that. I'll have my last caffeine by 10 o'clock at night sometimes.
That's why you're in a total brain fog all the time.
I never said that I was experiencing this. I just said that it's something that I've been tracking.
I put words in your mouth, and you were paying attention.
And one of the things that, or the paradox that I see, is that we're talking about this lack of attention and this brain fog issue at the same time that there's been a huge boom in the focus on things like mindfulness and paying more attention to being in the moment. And so are we not doing that? Have we missed that boat? Or are we doing that and we're still experiencing this? That's what I'm wondering.
I think we're like a dog chasing our tail.
Yeah.
Somebody says, oh, here's a hot topic, and everybody goes, wow, okay, and we chase that for a little while. And then somebody else comes in and says, wait, here's a hotter topic.
Yeah.
And then we chase that.
But you are not in any way denying that this is a phenomenon. You see the degradation of the human attention span as a very real thing that we have created within ourselves.
That. Yes.
Yeah. And so if we take that, because again, this isn't where I thought this was going to go, but I think you are right on target. And so if we focus on that and say that's the etiology of the brain fog is the reduced attention span, then what we have to focus on are things that are going to increase the attention span.
Absolutely.
So what are things that we believe would actually help people to increase their attention span?
Consequences. You know, Darwin, those that adapt survive, was right. And life is a competition for the acquisition of resources.
Man, that is not going to play favorably for most people, right?
No.
Because saying to them, oh, you have to recognize. You
got to produce.
Yeah, that there can be consequences.
You don't just get a job and a paycheck without doing something.
Right.
You have to produce. And you have to produce on demand.
Right.
I remember spending a lot of time talking to people about you have to learn to function on demand. When the bell rings, pay attention.
And I tell clients all the time, you never learn anything except through mistakes, consequences, and pain. No one ever learned anything if they did everything right. So the only way to learn is to experience those kinds of negative opportunities, but we don't take that as a learning experience. We say, oh, well, if you're giving me a negative, any kind of negative feedback, well, you're invading my right to believe whatever I want. Okay, so and
negative feedback is uncomfortable for me. If you were going to give me discomfort, you should have given me a trigger warning because I'm allergic to discomfort.
Right. And this is going to be, I'm going to go out on a limb. And just like as you did earlier, that's, I'm all for body positive. I have no issue with that. I'm not saying that I do, okay? But what I also know is that biologically, the human body is designed to carry a certain amount of weight. When you go over that, the internal organs are affected in a negative way. The viscera of the human body starts to impede the function of the internal organs. And that doesn't matter whether you're a weightlifter
it's not new.
Well, but so if we say, oh, if you are overweight, that's hard on your organs, then people say, oh, well, now you're body shaming. No, I'm telling you that's a medical fact. We can't say those things anymore. We can't give anybody any kind of negative information about themselves or their experience, or we're the bad guy.
Or we spend so much time chasing individual rabbits. So you say, okay, body positive is a concern. Obesity is a concern. How do we become obese? advertising, sugar content in food, the
loading up on glucose,
the government food paradigm that said eat corn and corn syrup and everything. That was an agricultural program to support farmers more than it was food production. But anyway, so you just keep going further and further down in the drain to find the cause, as if there is a cause. And you spend all your psychic energy going after that to have the provable aha moment. You also need to go the other way. You need to be saying, all right, this is what you do to avoid being obese. These are the steps that you take. This will help you. Here are some medicines that will help. Here are some behaviors that will help. Here's some nutritional information that you can use if you can afford to use it. If you live in a neighborhood that is really, really poor and people don't have money for food, then they get food stamps or some, and so then they find that in order to fill their bellies, they have to eat the least healthy food.
Because the least healthy food is the
10 bags
cheapest.
of potato
I know,
chips
it's
for
crazy.
which you can buy, a head of lettuce and a tomato. So then we sit and pontificate and say, well, don't eat potato chips. My God, you lazy son of a gun. So, I mean, so we have to balance the approach. We have to have the information. We have to be able to say, well, here's a key contributing factor. So let's try to address that. But then we have to look at the other side and say, here are a couple of steps that you can make on your own using discipline and effort to try to improve what you do.
So do you think that discipline is dead?
I don't do that global stuff. I think discipline is hard. And I think it comes to us from learning and experience and practice. And that's one of the responsibilities of parenting. When you have a child, you have to discipline them, set boundaries for their behaviors, and then you have to help them internalize that discipline for themselves.
And so if we were talking to a parent who was saying, completely laissez-faire, let your child be their own guide to their own exploration, what we're saying is you can do that, and we're not telling you can't do that. But if you don't discipline the child, if you don't model that, the child doesn't learn how to do that for themselves.
Not only model it, but have consequences to enforce what you're disciplining.
Right.
I mean, here is the limit. If you choose to eat 2 slices of pie, then there's a consequence for that. And you have to find a consequence that works for your kid. If you have 3 or 4 kids, you don't have a single consequence for all 4 kids.
Right.
That's a universal.
Right.
There'll be no television night for anybody in the family.
Right.
Because for me, television didn't make any difference. I'd read a book. When they want to get my attention, they'd say, you can't have a book tonight. My brother would be watching TV all night, and he'd be fine with that.
Right.
So if they said no TV for him, he was really upset. And if they said no TV for him because of something I had done, then he would be upset with me and want to have a conversation about, don't do this to me again. So there'd be pressure from multiple sources.
Right. Which is a
learning
social
tool.
Right. But that old concept of social pressure, I think we've gotten away from. We don't any longer think that it's okay to have the group put pressure on the individual.
Do it.
Right. We used to. I mean, that used to be the philosophies in schools.
Teachers used to use that.
And now we say, oh, no,
you all lost 5 minutes off your recess because Brett wouldn't behave. So I would suggest at lunch you talk to Brett about behaving.
And that's Rudolf Dreikurs back in the 1960s talked about that kind of stuff, and that you could use social pressure to keep individuals in line, but we don't allow that anymore. So do you think?
Well, Stanley Milgram did a similar thing.
Yeah, right. With the Milgram
obedience experience.
Yeah. Do you think we should go back to that, or do you think that it would be beneficial to reintroduce some of that thinking into the zeitgeist of the society? You love when I talk like that, I know.
I love when you ask me questions like that, with the implication being there's just a button that we need to push and fix it.
No, but that's why I tried to condition it. I said, do you think that it would be beneficial? Not should we do it and that'll solve everything. But do you believe that if we started to get back to some of those things, that would be helpful?
So reframe this in the reason why we do these podcasts.
Yeah.
We're talking about people that are therapists and how to do therapy, or people that are going to therapy and how they should experience that. I think it's Albert Schweitzer, I believe, was one that says, better to light a single candle than to curse the darkness.
Mm-hmm.
I can't make a decision that will apply to the United States, but I can work with my client on acquiring self-discipline skills and learning to monitor their own behavior and put themselves in a target-rich environment for consequences that they own and experience and pay willingly. If you try a behavior, you have to know ahead of time it's going to come with a consequence. And that may be uncomfortable.
So if I were going to boil it down,
one person at a time.
But that we have to become comfortable again with believing that consequences are beneficial.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that we promote that idea anymore.
Right. We don't promote it as much, I think, as we should. And again, it's a matter of extremes. You have to find the balance point in between. You don't want to go to live in a rigid, autocratic society where everybody's in lockstep, like handmaidens, where everybody has to do everything the same way, the same time. That's too far to the extreme. But we need consequences. We need to internalize self-discipline, set goals, pay attention, produce on demand, climb that ladder.
So we're going to wrap this up, but I'm going to say to you, thank you for an intellectually stimulating conversation. Again, this is not where I thought this was going to go, but it has opened up so many new pathways in my brain of things that now I'm thinking about that I want to revisit. So I really appreciate that because, again, I had envisioned this going in a very, very different direction, but this was fantastic. If you want to do us a favor here at the show, what you can do is go on the interwebs and find us on Facebook, and you can subscribe to the show, or you can follow the show there. You can find us on YouTube and subscribe to the show. That is something that we really, really, really encourage people to do because that is super helpful. You can find us on Apple Podcasts and leave us a comment and a review, and that helps other people find the show, and we appreciate that. And as always, if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike.